What is going on, investors? Hopefully you guys had a great week. Happy Friday. It is time for our FAANG stock recap show where we recap all the FAANG stocks and a little bit of Microsoft and Tesla as well. We'll go through a little bit of the news and then we'll jump over to the stock chart and see how things have been performing over the last couple of trading days. Now, Facebook's one that we identified actually on last week's show as a potential buy, and we don't always get it right here on the show, but this one we did. It started the week at about 250, ended up 274. So this one bounced off a critical level. When we come over to this chart, I'll show you exactly what we saw. And in fact, I think I saw some people in the comments below said that they were going to jump in on this one. So hopefully some of you made a little bit of money on Facebook. Now, not a lot of news coming out of Facebook. They report earnings next week, January 27th. In fact, that's going to be a busy day for earnings. So a little bit of a quiet period, at least in terms of news. But some big news is the Trump suspension is referred to an independent oversight board on Facebook. How independent they are, I don't know. I've read articles about this and who's in charge of this independent oversight board. I don't know if it's independent or not, but it could be this could be interesting news, because if the platforms see that engagement and stuff like that, maybe traffic and users on the site has declined because a polarizing figure like Trump is no longer there, it'll be interesting to see if these companies reverse their stance and allow him back on the platform. How much relevance Trump has in a new administration as time goes on, as the years go on. His insights and his influence will probably diminish slightly. In fact, I think that's a fact, much like other presidents like Obama and Clinton and Bush, which are also still alive today. So we'll see what happens with this one. We'll see if Trump is allowed back on the platform. Obviously, that would create an uproar on both sides, maybe a happiness from his supporters and certainly anger from his detractors. But we've been seeing that the last couple of years anyways. People have been angry with him for 4 years. So we'll see if any of that changes. So that's Facebook news. Apple started the week at about 129, melted up. This actually went up over and above. We basically made all-time highs with Apple. We'll talk about that when we go over the chart, what kind of impact that might have. Now, Apple's also running into earnings. On January 27th, we'll also have Apple earnings along with Facebook and Tesla as well. That's going to be a busy day. You might want to subscribe or hit that like button here on the channel so you see those videos. Apple, a fair amount of news actually this week. Today, I think this was, or yesterday, they plan a premium MacBook Air for a potential 2021 launch. Obviously, Apple has kind of shifted to their next generation in-house chip. So they used Intel for the longest time, I think for a really long time. Now they're shifting to their own chips because that'll allow them to use Face ID, this MagSafe. It'll allow Apple to kind of integrate some of the other stuff that they have going on with their phones and their iPads into the computers. So expect this to just happen over the coming years. The MacBook Air, the MacBook Pro, I think we've already seen launched with the M1 chip. Eventually you'll see the iMac and other forms of the Macintosh computers shift to this new platform. I think this will be exciting if you're in the market for a new laptop. Apple shares rise after price target boost ahead of a record quarter. So we have analysts who have, I don't want to say like inside information, but they definitely have more insight to these types of things than maybe the average investor. I think Apple will have a great quarter. I don't think I'm breaking any news there. And here's on top of this, they plan to release an expensive quote unquote VR headset as early as next year. Well, you know how big the VR headset will be. Obviously, Facebook has this Oculus product, which I have never tried, but I'm sure has its own market out there. We'll see what this does for Apple. I don't necessarily think this is going to be a big business for them, but could add another product line to the mix. Now, we see pricing come ahead of rivals, which is $300 to $900. So that's pretty expensive considering what an Xbox and maybe a PS4 after they come down to kind of those retail prices will be. Now, in terms of Apple share prices, we're seeing targets from $144 to $154. And again, this stock is at about $140. So we're seeing upside, more upside predicted by analysts ahead of next week's earnings call with Apple. Now, moving on to Amazon. They started the week at 31.33. Went up a little bit. We'll talk a little bit more about that when we jump over the stock chart with Amazon. They're at about $3,300 per share. Amazon reports February 2nd, so kind of after the big wave of tech companies and Tesla and Microsoft. We'll have Amazon earnings. Spoiler alert, that's probably going to be pretty darn good. Now, Amazon is partnered and has invested in this Rivian, which we've covered here on the channel. I did an EV show a little while ago where I talked about this company. They actually have a lot of pre-orders for their truck, which I was actually surprised about. I thought for sure this is one of those companies with not a lot of pre-orders, but they have a lot, and Amazon is increasing their investment in there, and this company has a really big valuation at $27 billion. So obviously a lot of heat and a lot of investor excitement around these electric vehicle startups, and Amazon is jumping in there as well. Now, Netflix, probably the one company out of all these that don't have EV exposure, maybe Facebook as well. Maybe they'll jump into that. But Netflix, not really an EV company. So Netflix reported earnings this week. I posted a video about it. We talked about how their subscribers really grew in the markets outside the United States. So that's a positive. They also hinted on the call, which was recorded after I posted my video, that maybe some shareholder-friendly stuff like buybacks and things like that, as cash flow really starts to flow into Netflix, they might be executing stuff like that help propel these shares big time this week. Started the week at about 502, ended at 565. Technically, Netflix is at a really interesting level. When we jump over to the stock chart of Netflix, we'll talk about what this means up here, where it could potentially go here in the future. So that's Netflix. Google started the week at $17.42, had a really good week, ended at $1,900, about $1,900 per share. Now, this is interesting. So Google threatens to disable search in Australia over proposed news payment law. So we talked about this a couple weeks ago. So Australia passed this law enforcing Google to pay like local publishers for news, so in its feed and things like that. So Google's now kind of countered, saying, hey, the law is unworkable, so we're going to pull Google search from Australia, which would be like a really interesting power move, because it could work two ways, okay? The people and the people that elect these government officials that pass these types of laws could be like, no, we want Google back. Or maybe people realize, you know what? Life goes on without Google. There's alternatives and things like that. So it could work both ways. Obviously, Australia is probably a fraction of Google's overall revenue. But boy, this could really be interesting if others pass similar laws and then Google pulls out. We'll see what happens. This is interesting. I really want to see what happens with this. See which party kind of bends first. Which one breaks first? Will the Australian lawmakers kind of bend first? Will the people that the news organizations that kind of want these payments, will they break first? Or will Google just say, hey, we're out of here? And then we'll see the demand for Google after that. Will Australian citizens be like, oh, well, whatever, I'll use Yahoo or DuckDuckGo or something. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. Microsoft started the week at 213. Nice move by Microsoft up to 225. We'll talk about that when we move over to the stock chart. Microsoft teams up with GM's Cruise on autonomous vehicles. So now Microsoft, it's kind of in the autonomous vehicle space in terms of the chips and things like that, data center. But they're really kind of getting in a big way here with GM's Cruise division. So they've got a $2 billion equity round. So they've kind of joined that round. Microsoft, this likely won't be a big part of Microsoft's revenue, but it'll help bolster their Azure cloud platform, which is one of the bigger segments that they do have. So interesting that almost all these companies are now jumping into that EV space. Now, Tesla started the week at 855, ended the week essentially flat, 850. We talked about on last week's show going sideways for Tesla. Not necessarily the worst thing in the world. After such a parabolic rise over the last month, over the last 6 months, especially over the last year, this stock has just gone, 670% over the last year. Going sideways for a minute, not bad. We see it went sideways here, and then that kind of triggered that next leg. We went sideways here, triggered a leg of growth. So we'll talk about that when we jump over to the stock chart. Now, electric vehicle shocker. StoreDot develops a battery that can be charged in 5 minutes. Okay, this is a private company. It's somewhere overseas. Nobody has necessarily seen this. It's really more of a claim, although they've kind of demonstrated it a little bit. So we'll see in a small form battery cell. We'll see if this is possible. I would guess this is a positive just in general for the entire EV space. If a company like this can develop a battery like this, I don't necessarily think it'll be exclusive to them because they're not making cars. They're not making other things. They'll either license this technology out or just show the fact that it is possible. And someone like Tesla or NIO or some of these other battery companies that are well-funded will do the research too and come up with things. In my opinion, this would definitely help EV. I mean, I don't think EVs need any help at all, but if they can be charged in 5 minutes, it certainly would, help even more people kind of convert to the EV lifestyle. Now, Tesla lands a street high price target from Oppenheimer, key group there. So Oppenheimer raised its target to 1036 from 486. So they're 486. The stock's obviously at $800 something dollars. So they bumped it up. They got maybe about $200, about $100 more than the shares are now standing. But that is a street high price target. At this point, Tesla has just kind of run away from even the Wall Street analysts. So again, it going sideways allows the Wall Street to kind of catch up, so to speak, and then maybe Tesla makes that next move. We'll talk about that when we move over to the stock chart. Final news on Tesla, it sees strong demand for its Model Y. I live out here in California. I mean, Teslas are like kind of a dime a dozen. When I go to other places around the country, seeing a Tesla is actually kind of a special thing. Out here in California, I mean, you see them all over the place. I have family members with them. I mean, you go to the Bay Area, you see them all over the place. So this is Tesla's market. The supercharger network is built out. It's a densely populated area. And so, finding places to charge your Tesla and things like that is not particularly hard. Now, I've been in a Tesla and we've been in areas where there's no charging station. And look, it does get a little dicey. And someone like me having a family, I haven't converted to the EV yet because the network's just not there yet. Even out here in California, I can imagine other parts of the country as well. But that is a growth platform ahead for all these EV makers. You get that built out across the United States. It'll make more people more encouraged to get into the EV car segment. So moving on to the stock chart, Facebook, this was last week. It was right down here. I said, anytime Facebook over the last couple months has hit this box, it has been a buy. Look, it rallied here, hit here, rallied, came down here, and then sure enough, it rallies. Now, again, technical analysis is not a perfect predictor, but it gives you odds enhancing information that can help you. A lot of people will just write off technical analysis and say, I don't need to pay attention to it. It's just lines on the graph. Guys, this is supply and demand right here. This is what this stock chart illustrates. Supply and demand is all what the stock market is about, is supply and demand. And that's what we saw play out perfectly here. It doesn't always do that. And you always want to, have your risk intact, have stop losses and things like that. But it did work out perfectly with Facebook. Now they're heading into earnings next week, January 27th. Okay, we'll see what happens. If Snapchat reports before Facebook and they report positive earnings, this thing will likely pop, because if Snapchat's doing well or any of the other online advertisers like a Pinterest or Twitter do well, guess what? Facebook probably knocked it out of the park. I think we could come up here and retest these. If this bull run continues over the last week, I think we could easily come back up here and test 304 to 305. That's another $25 over where the shares are now. Now, if Facebook has user problems, don't communicate kind of the Trump situation well on the call, if there's evidence that banning Trump has really impacted them, at least in the shorter term, well, this thing could come back down, but it could create a buying opportunity again down here in the 240s, 250s. So we'll see what happens with Facebook. Now, Apple reports next week as well, January 27th. Very key level just got broken with Apple over the last day or so. So it peaked its head over the kind of all-time highs at about 139-ish. And we kind of broke through it and actually closed ahead of it today. So Apple's kind of in a precarious spot, okay? Good earnings might propel this one higher. Who knows how much higher, okay? There's no price action above this. There's no supply or demand above this level. And so that's why it's just a really interesting level. That's why you've seen stocks like GameStop and other things can just soar on one day when kind of these supply and demand levels just get broken. Now, the other thing could happen, Apple could disappoint a little bit and this thing could retrace a little bit. Any retrace down, especially into the 119 area, I mean, that's $20 off where we are. It's not unheard of. Any retrace down in here, in my opinion, would be a buying opportunity for Apple. Amazon did a similar thing as Apple, kind of peeked its head. Now, not quite to the all-time highs, but it's peeked its head. Look, it's peeked its head here. It peeked its head here. It kind of really did a nice peek up here, but always broke down, peeked its head here. Now, again, Amazon's not reporting next week. We're actually coming in at February 2nd with Amazon. And so we'll see. Any sell-off into the 3,100 range would, in my opinion, be a buying opportunity. Even further down, 2,900, even bigger buying opportunity. I think they'll have a good quarter. How they'll communicate that with investors will be interesting to see. But this one's in a real nice spot to where any positive news with Amazon, and we're absolutely going to retest these highs back up here at 3,650 or so. So we'll see what happens with, 3,550. Those definitely can be in play over the next week. And that is, boy, that is like almost $300 more than we're at now. So, big moves could happen in these stocks in the weeks ahead. Now, we saw a big move in Netflix. Netflix popped like it's hot on earnings day. This big gap is earnings. So they announced earnings, popped way above here, way above our range. Now, it has retraced and it's hit a level of what I would call support right around that 560, 550 level, right in here, actually 560 level, right in here should act as support because it was an all-time high here and it was very close to an all-time high here. So it's hanging out here. Any break below this level, and yes, I think you have a good potential for Netflix to come down to actually this level, 540. That would be the first spot. Since I'm a pullback investor, I like to buy these stocks on pullbacks, just like Facebook last week. I like to buy them on pullbacks. Any pullback to 540 wouldn't be my all-in point, wouldn't be a point where I got super excited, but any break in momentum on this stock, right at this 560 mark could pull us back into the 540s, and then even lower than that, you've got 520, even more lower than that, 510, and hey, we can all dream a little bit. The stock has been up over this 540 level and it's retraced all the way down to the 470s. Any pullback into there, it's just like Facebook. It pulled down to the bottom of our range. And if Netflix happens to do that, I think it's absolutely a buy. Now, on to Google. Interesting thing happening with Google. I've actually got this on a weekly chart. I'm going to change this over to a daily chart and see how things change here. So Google looks nice. I mean, it's just popped, okay? And it actually re-popped this week. So we popped up. This is why these all-time highs, when I mark out these all-time highs, they are critical levels because if you can break above them with a momentum, this all-time high was at 1825. So we're at 1825, was basically an all-time high. We blew up on momentum, and then we even went all the way up to like 1930 on this one. So that's a huge move. That's like $100 and over $100 in just a few trading days. So that's what happens. That's why I'm very keenly watching Apple. It's basically in the same position. Amazon is close, not quite there yet. Facebook is getting there, okay, this level up in here. So all these stock, and then actually Netflix executed this perfectly. It popped above its all-time highs was here, and it popped way above that. So that's why you got to really closely follow these stocks because they can pop above these levels. Now, I'm a pullback investor. I'd like to see this one pull back into a range where we can get it. What will trigger that? I don't know. I think a broader market sell-off would be nice. Any consolidation back into this range, there's a lot of price action here. 1720 up to 1820 would be a nice area, in my opinion, for Google. Taking a look at Microsoft with, again, reports on January 26th, so kind of a day before Facebook, Apple, and Tesla report. So we're heading into earnings. This thing is melting up a little bit. Good earnings should easily, in my opinion, pop this above the all-time highs around that 230 range. So a lot of green space up here. If this stock can continue to pop, you could see some really nice gains in Microsoft. Now, if they disappoint, pullbacks down into the 210s, in my opinion, would be the first stop where I'd be very excited to get Microsoft. Any further below that, I would be jumping into it very quickly and likely with a full position. But the first intermediate spot, 210 on disappointed earnings, guidance, whatever it might be, 210, in my opinion, would be a decent spot to pull the trigger on Microsoft. But if you're a momentum trader, a high risk trader, you want to put on some kind of YOLO trades, boy, this one has a lot of room above it. In fact, all these stocks do it. And you saw what happened to Netflix. We had this big, gigantic jump up above all-time highs. The same could happen with Amazon. The same setup is sitting here with Apple, although it's kind of blown above it. Facebook as well. Any really positive earnings, this thing could gap up above what we've seen before. Finally, moving on to Tesla. This one is oh man, I mean, this is doing exactly what we thought it could do last week. It's just kind of consolidate sideways. So we're just kind of consolidating here. We're kind of creating this wedge. What often happens when you get this wedge is we get a pop one way or another. Now, Tesla reports on January 27th. Now, they've already kind of pre-announced earlier this month that how many cars they've sold. I think they sold about 500,000. So sophisticated analysts can kind of back that into how much they made on revenue, how much they made on profit, because they know the price of the cars, they know the sales mix, all that stuff is pretty well telegraphed at this point. That's probably why this stock is trading sideways, because the information about Tesla is out there. Now, could they come out with something on earnings day that's a surprise like they have in the past, like a stock split? I don't think they're going to announce a stock split anytime soon. They just did that, but maybe they announce something else, a new kind of car, a new service that they offer, something to pop this stock up, because I don't think earnings alone is going to do it, because like I said, we are kind of already know what's going to be on Tesla's earnings report when they report on January 27th, but can something else pop it? And the key level you're looking for is right around 880. Okay, any break above this top on momentum, strong green candle is basically uptrends back intact. Now, we could break below. That's certainly possible with Tesla. The first logical spot of resistance really all the way back down here at about 660, 650-ish dollars per share. My opinion, that would create buying opportunities anywhere inside this box here would create a buying opportunity with Tesla. Now, if you say, oh no, there's no way the stock ever pulls back into those range. Yeah, we've seen this stock go from 502 all the way down to 330 bucks. And this is a daily chart. This is only over a couple of days. And so the same thing could happen. It could create a buying opportunity. I'd have a close eye on Tesla as well. So that's the FAANG stocks. We are at critical levels heading into earnings. It should be an exciting week next week. Hit that subscribe button and potentially that like button as well on our channel, because we will be covering all these stocks: Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Microsoft, and Tesla all report earnings over the next 7 to 2 weeks, and I will be here to help you dissect it all. Thanks for tuning in today on our Friday show. We'll be back again next week. Have a great weekend. Good luck with your investments.